What's going on YouTube? In today's video, I'm going to give you guys an overview of the HK416. So I haven't done a clone overview on my channel in a little while. That's because I've been in kind of a weird spot with a lot of my builds. I'm still finishing up a lot of old builds and holding off on starting new ones until the old ones are finished. So I haven't really had anything new to show you guys in a while, but I have reached out to a couple of people who are into the clone community, like myself, who have graciously offered to let me review their guns. And so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you the HK416 clone built by dank_firearms on Instagram. So be sure to go follow him there, and I'll leave his link down in the description. So getting into it, the HK416 weapon system was designed by HK back in the 90s and was formally adopted by the US military in 2004. Initially, it was only really used by Delta Force, and it was to replace their M4 carbine, since in testing it was determined that the short stroke gas piston system, which was derived from the HK-G36 family, was less prone to malfunctions and had a longer service life compared to the M4. So, since being adopted on a small scale, the weapon system and its derivatives, which I'll talk about, have seen very widespread use throughout the world. These weapons are in the hands of many major militaries. The French army actually adopted a version of the 416 as their standard issue infantry rifle. And the Marine Corps has adopted the M27 IAR, which is a variant of the 416, as the standard infantry rifle of the US Marine Corps. And during testing, it was pretty obvious why this weapon system was such a success. There were actually examples of testing that showed that this weapon system can undergo as many as 10,000 rounds of full auto fire without cleaning. So, like I said, this has been implemented by various groups throughout the US military and throughout the world. And I'll talk about some of the variants that the US military has used it in. So starting off, the original HK416 with the 14.5-inch barrel, as well as what you see here, the 10.4-inch barreled HK416D, is still in use by a lot of Tier 1 groups. The newest variants of the system include updated furniture, a tan finish, and an updated accessory set. And those are commonly seen in the hands of guys in Delta and other more obscure Tier 1 groups. Like I said, the Marine Corps currently uses the M27 IAR, and they also use the M38 marksman rifle, which is essentially an M27 with a different scope on it. Both of which use a 16.1-inch barrel and, in true Marine Corps fashion, incorporate a bayonet lug. Marine Recon has also been seen using the 416, although they have the new 416A5 uppers, which they're using on M27 lowers. So the A5 variant that they're using, just speaking about the upper receiver, has an 11-inch barrel, has a 2-position adjustable gas block, and some design changes to improve the accuracy and reliability of the system. So I'll clip in a couple pictures of that here. So with the history lesson out of the way, how can you build one of these yourself? There are a couple different common routes people will take to build a 416 clone, and obviously they'll vary by how much patience you need and how much money you'll have to invest into the project. So the first route is to start with HK's commercial version of the 416, which is the MR556A1. Now, the MR556A1 already shares a lot of design characteristics with the 416, although there are a few things that you'll want to change if you want to have it be more of a true to design clone of the 416. So the MR556 will come with a heavier barrel profile. Of course, it'll have different markings on the receiver to denote that it is a different model of firearm. You may need to swap out the furniture. And then for those of you that actually want to run this on an M16 lower, because the 416 uppers will actually pair with a M16 full auto lower, you'll need to address the problem with the bolt carrier that it comes with being a neutered bolt carrier, and also the upper receiver has a little tab on the inside that will prevent you from putting in a full auto bolt carrier group unless you mill it off. So, not that that's important for everybody, but for those of you that want to run these full auto, it is worth noting that'll take a little extra work. As far as the barrel goes, the MR556 has a much heavier barrel profile than the 416, which makes it a lot more front heavy. I know in the past gunsmiths such as Adco or D. Wilson Manufacturing have actually performed barrel work on these to make MR556 barrels more closely resemble the 416's barrel. So those are two that I would check on if you're looking to go down this route. And then as far as the engravings on the receiver go, there are a lot of internet forums and Facebook pages where people have done this. They've, sandblasted off the old markings and then re-anodized or cerakoted the lower and the upper, and then had the new engravings laser etched on, since HK just does laser engravings from the factory. They're not roll marks or anything. So those are easy enough to remark if you want to give it the proper markings. And it should be mentioned that Brownells from time to time actually has their own line of 416 compatible parts that they sell. And on this particular example that you see in front of you, the lower receiver is a Brownells BRN4 lower, which has been remarked with the appropriate markings. Although the upper, the bolt carrier, and a lot of the small parts, including the gas block and the trigger, are all true HK parts, or rather the trigger is a Geisley HK trigger. So the only Brownells parts on this gun are the lower and the barrel. And then as far as furniture goes for these guns, furniture including the stocks, pistol grips, and the handguards, those are for the most part readily available, but in true HK fashion, they are expensive, especially on websites like HKparts.net. Some of these handguards are literally hundreds, if not close to $1,000. So just know that before you get into building one of these. There's not a single part on this gun that is cheap or comparable in price to standard AR parts. So another common route that people will use to build these guns is to buy a complete 416 upper, known as an OTB or over the beach upper. So this is essentially a real 416 upper sold through HK, and that makes its way to dealers and police departments, and occasionally you'll find them floating around in the commercial market. This is obviously the more expensive route, since a real 416 upper is going to command a premium, being sold anywhere from $4,000 up to $5,500 average. And even after purchasing that very expensive upper, you're still in need of a lower and accessories, furniture, optics. So again, nothing about this project is going to be cheap, but in my experience, those kind of projects are the most satisfying because they really force you, at least most of us, to take our time with the build and really pick and choose and look for deals on parts, and finally getting a build put together after months and months and months or even years. It's a good feeling. Some people have even gone as far as to have their receivers re-anodized in FDE, or tanodized as people have called it, to resemble the newer variants of the 416 used by CAG. So quick note, just make sure that whatever laser engraver you're using doesn't copy the markings from a airsoft gun to use on your 416 receiver set. Otherwise, you'll end up with a weird joule rating on the side. Joules being the amount of force that the airsoft gun shoots the BB out with, which has happened in the past. Really quickly, I'll talk about the accessories used on the 416. I can't cover everything since this rifle has been in service for so long and used by so many different groups. But in general, you're going to see these used with a lot of the accessories that are common within the Special Forces community, and that includes EOTechs like the 553 seen here, as well as newer EOTechs like the XPS, the EXPS. You'll see aimpoint variants, aimpoint micros. You'll see these with or without magnifiers, with or without riser mounts. You'll see some Night Force NXS scopes, particularly in use by Navy guns. Trijicon ACOGs, which are extremely common on Marine Corps guns on the M27s. On the M38, you'll see Leupold Mark IV scopes. And then there are various other scopes, including LPVOs and pretty much anything under the sun. As far as flashlights go, on really old 416s, you'll see some of the pre-Surefire Scout lights from Surefire. But pretty much everything after that, vast majority of them will be some kind of Surefire Scout light. And then as far as IR lasers go, you're going to see, unsurprisingly, a lot of L3 products, such as the PEC 15. You'll see the newer PEC 15 LA5 model, and, as well as the NGOL on some of the newest guns. And then as far as the flash lasers go, you're going to see a lot of L3 products, such as the PEC 15 LA5 model, and, as well as the NGOL on some of the newest guns. And then as far as the IR lasers go, you're going to see, unsurprisingly, a lot of L3 products, such as the PEC 15 LA5 model, and, as well as the NGOL on some of the newest guns. And then suppressors, I want to mention. Suppressors are kind of an interesting subject with the 416. So the 416, by nature of being a short-stroke gas piston system, is overgassed. And this makes suppressor choice pretty important on this gun. Some suppressors were actually designed with this gun in mind, such as the AAC 416 SD, which was specifically designed to run with the 416's overgassed system. Other suppressors were chosen for use on this because they naturally have a lower level of back pressure that it adds to the system. So you'll see Surefire suppressors, both their Legacy and their SOCOM series, and then you'll see Knights Armament NT4s pretty commonly used on these as well, especially on Marine Corps guns. And then as far as handguards go, by far the most common handguard you'll see is the one here. It's just HK's standard quad rail, but there are some more rare and desirable options that we're seeing on some guns within SOCOM that you may look out for if you want to have something a little bit different. There were rails made by Daniel Defense. There were also rails made by Remington. And then, of course, Geisley. So if you want something a little bit more different, or if your build demands it, those rail systems typically command somewhat of a premium. So while the 416 is a very prolific weapon system with a reputation that is very well respected, it does have some drawbacks that I feel are worth discussing. So number one is going to be cost. I know I've talked about that a few times throughout the video. The cost of the 416 for both a military consumer and a commercial consumer is going to be somewhat prohibitive. These are expensive enough that the U.S. military didn't necessarily want to put one into the hands of every single, soldier. Although the Marine Corps now is fully outfitted with these, so times are changing. And as a commercial consumer, these are very, very expensive to build. So they are also just slightly heavier and more bulky than something like an M4 carbine. So that mainly comes from the short stroke gas piston system adding some weight. There's some extra mechanisms there that add some weight to the gun. And in true German fashion, these guns are overbuilt and overdesigned in general. That is worth noting. Much like most gas piston system guns, it does have a more sharp, violent recoil impulse compared to an AR-15. And one big thing worth noting is that variants of the 416 prior to the A5 are actually not compatible with all AR-15 magazines. Some magazines, like the Gen 1 and 2 Magpul PMags, actually will not lock into a 416 because of the angle of the magwell. And then lastly, I'd say the biggest detractor from the 416 is the proprietary nature of its design. There are some parts on the 416 that are cross-compatible with an AR-15, but there's not a lot of them. And then the high wear parts, like the barrel, the bolt carrier group, the piston assembly, none of that is interchanged with an AR-15, meaning that if you want to actually go use and abuse this gun and you want to stock up on spare parts, well, you're going to be stocking up on some very expensive proprietary spare parts. I think that that's where I'm going to end the video for today. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them below in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram at inferior_rifles, as well as the owner of this rifle, who was kind enough to lend it to me, at dank_firearms. Links to both will be down in the video description, and thank you for watching.